to begin.
You're listening to KQBHLP, Los Angeles, California, 101.5 FM, a community service of the Boyle Heights Arts Conservatory, broadcasting live on your FM dial and streaming on kqbhla.com. You're listening to The Social Primate with your host, Eddie Aguirre. And real quick, before we get started, if you haven't checked out the new website for KQBHLA, super dope, super fun. Like, take the time to go through it and check out some of the programming there. But without further ado, we have the one and only, a powerful mujer in the building. We got Fernanda Sanchez.
Hey, what's up? Happy to be here. We were just saying it's been 7 months, and time has flown by, but so much has happened since then, and I'm really happy to be here again, and I appreciate that, Eddie.
Yeah, no, well, thank you again. You know, like you mentioned, it's been 7 whole months. So much stuff has happened in all sense of the word, locally, globally. Like, geez, like it's nonstop. You know.
It really is nonstop, and I was just saying, like, this really is Dante's Inferno, and so I'm really happy that today's conversation is going to revolve around, like, how do we survive this hell, and what are we doing, like, with our time here?
Yeah. Now, for sure, one of the things that I definitely wanted to reach out to you in regards to was this Flattop situation that's going on, right? And it's something that I wasn't even aware of, and that's one of the reasons that I like having these conversations, is because a lot of the times I'm pretty ignorant on a bunch of stuff that's going on around me, you know? And I think that feeling kind of relates to some other folks that I've come across. You know, we don't know what's really going on. And then when we get something like this brought up to our attention, we're like, wait, what is this? Like, why is this a big deal? Yeah. Why are people fighting for a hill? Yeah. Right? I think that's the biggest thing people will initially start with, right? But you, knowing this area, knowing this history, like, tell me why this is important.
Yeah, I'm really happy that curiosity is like sparking these conversations, because a lot of us are super distracted in the world, and we have like information overload on social media, and we don't take the moment to really talk about, wait a minute, what's really happening in our community. Have you ever been to Flattop?
No, I haven't.
Oh my God, it's the most beautiful place. It's one of my favorite places on earth. It's the best view of LA. And it's the oldest hill in the Los Angeles basin. It's over 20 million years old, and it used to be underwater. Wow. Yeah. What? Yeah, it used to be the Pacific Ocean. Yeah. And in 2013, actually, they found a whale skull up at Flattop, like completely intact. And
what?
And if you go to the Natural History Museum, it's there, and it's literally called the Lincoln Heights whale. So
what? This is mind-blowing information for me. What the?
Yeah, you should go check it out. Check out the Lincoln Heights whale. The skull is right there, and that was found at Flattop. And so when we think about Flattop, it's been divided into 2 portions. There's the Montecito Heights side of Flattop, and then there's the Lincoln Heights side of Flattop, and that's where the battle is today. But I really want to preface with what Flattop was 100 years ago. And so 100 years ago, the community of Montecito Heights was just barely emerging. And houses were barely being constructed. And at the time, there is a Los Angeles Times article that documents that the homeowners of Montecito Heights were calling the police on Indigenous elders that would do rituals at Flattop at night. And the article is about a policeman confronting the Indigenous elders and describing their ritual of honoring Chief Cucamonga. And I always point to that story because that's what privatizing a green space looks like. It means we lose access. It means we are disconnected from not only green space, but our indigenous roots. And so fast forward 100 years to today, that side of Flattop now has a gate with a code that the homeowners are the only ones that have access to and control. And it's completely privatized. And would you feel welcome? You don't. And so when you go to the other side of Flattop, which is the Lincoln Heights side, that is a side that is not really developed yet. There is one mansion that has been abandoned for years there, and it's still being constructed. And now they want to construct a mansion 4 times bigger than anything on that hill, anything in Lincoln Heights, really, right next to the abandoned mansion. And like, if that's not like poetry, I don't know what is. Like, does LA really need another mansion when there are so many abandoned ones? So, I mean, if you want, I could get into like how this fight at Flattop started in 2021.
Yeah, I mean, again, I'm kind of fresh into all this information, right? But what I was reading was that I guess technically this land is still considered private in a sense, right? But it's been used for so long by the community because it's been, air quotes, abandoned, that it's become a public space for the community, right?
Oh, 100%. It's an open piece of land. If you go up there, you wouldn't know that any of it is owned by anybody. Yeah. And that's exactly how the developer describes it, as abandoned. But it's not. People go there every single day to watch the sunrise, the sunset, to go walk their dogs, to go on a walk. And there are community cleanups there quite often. There's efforts for land stewardship up there. And the sad reality is those plots of land are privately owned by people, all of them. And that brings us to the question of who gets to own green space? Who gets to dictate what happens to our ancestral lands, especially green open space? We don't have that in LA. If you go up there, I mean, I always say you feel the magic. Like, you see all of LA, like, you can feel the hill living and breathing. And the thought of a huge mansion being there will set a precedence for more development for the entirety of Flattop, and we would lose it.
Yeah, I had read some interesting fact, something along the words that, and this is for Southeast LA, which is where I'm from, right? That I think is one of the most poor areas in terms of green spaces. And I believe there's only like 1 acre per 1,000 people or something, compared to like more affluent communities that tend to have like 5 acres of park or green space for the community, And it kind of, which is one of the reasons why I was like, okay, this resonates to me in so many levels, because although we don't have a hill, at the end of the day, there's so many green spaces that I see in Southeast LA where houses have been knocked out, and now there's places as big as football field just abandoned that's been there for like years. And it makes you wonder, like, why, if nobody's using it, why lock it up, put a gate on it, private property, and just block it out for everybody when this is a space that, I don't know, kids can come out to. They can play, run around or something, like expose themselves to their community.
100%. I think it comes down to colonialism and capitalism. The idea that we need to have ownership of land without any thought of the ecosystem or the impacts it has on the people that occupy these spaces. And being disconnected from green space is like a huge shift to like people as well. Like, there's a Flattop hike club, and it's just a bunch of little kids up there. And they play with the roly-polies, and they play with the bugs, and who does that? Where do we have access to that these days? And when you're a child and you grow up in that kind of environment with that access, it changes everything. One of the organizers that I work with, he's a literal scientist, a biologist, and he grew up in Lincoln Heights, and he said that he grew up at Flattop digging stuff and looking at stuff, and he said, if I didn't have access to this, I would have never thought of wanting to be a scientist. Yeah. And that's huge. The access to these sorts of third spaces is what we need now more than ever, and we need to fight to preserve that.
Yeah, I get that. And over the weekend I was at an event right there in Bell, and I was kind of taking little interviews from people. They were writing notes about their experiences in Southeast LA. And one of them was saying that because we didn't have access to any green spaces, the closest thing that we had to nature was the riverbed, which is from Southeast LA is probably like less than a mile, where depending on where you're from, right? Or where you're at. But even then, like, it's concrete, right? All you have is just the river and the algae and the wildlife that kind of, gets together there. But that's the crazy part, that was our only escape. Like, we had to make our way there just to feel connected to it, to an extent, to nature.
Yeah, and isn't Isn't that sad?
That's extremely depressing.
It's really depressing, especially when we understand that our rivers are not the ecosystems they used to be.
Yeah.
So when we have an ecosystem that is thriving on its own, and I should name that Flattop is one of the only places like in this area that grow black walnut trees naturally. Mm-hmm. And black walnut trees are like thousands of years old, and they're native to California, and they're also fire resistant. And there's a black walnut tree like right on the property of where they want to build. And these are like state protected trees. And even then, when we see all of the facts, developers will jump through so many hoops and pay whoever they need to pay to justify building on lands like this. And in 2021, the owner submitted all these permits, requests, and the city denied it. In fact, we had 84 letters opposing it at the time, and it was a group of us in the neighborhood council and outside of the neighborhood council formed a group called Free Flattop, and we were working really hard to let people know about this. Mm-hmm. And the hearing was like 3 hours long, and that zoning administrator actually went to Flattop himself. And when he was there, like, he was shook. He was like, this is beautiful, this is crazy. And then less than a month later, he wrote like a 84-page report saying that he's denying the development. Mm-hmm. And he even attached the entire public comment that was over 3 hours long.
Damn.
Yeah.
That's crazy. You know, and I think that's what I was briefly mentioning. I think that's what I read, at least from the article on LAist.
Yeah.
I'm going to read that letters in favor of the project, which
Please.
was just one.
Just one, yeah.
And this is the quote here. It says, I'm writing to you about the project. Those lots are privately owned, and the owners of those lots should be able to build a house of their size and choosing. I support the construction here. There are always empty alcohol bottles there, and people go up there to do drugs. Building a house there will ward off that activity. Development will encourage more development in that area and drive vagrants out. I understand that people walk up there to enjoy the view, but they should not put their personal desires over that of the property owners. And I was like, what? Dude, this sounds so selfish, right? What are you talking about? You're getting your emotions tied into this too, you know? Like, but I read that and I was like, wow. And the fact that there was just one opposing this whole project speaks volumes.
100%. And I really want to point to how he called the community vagrants. Mm-hmm. When we are confronted with gentrification and the erasure of any community or peoples, one of the first steps in that is the criminalization of people, the dehumanization of people.
Exactly.
When you start to see a community as less than, as not people, it's easier to displace them. And I have a deep issue when I hear developers criminalize this and victimize themselves. Mm-hmm. It happens every time. And it's important to acknowledge the power dynamic here. Who is the person investing $3 million in property? Who is the person that is at risk of being displaced from their community? And so I also don't like to dictate how community should behave in open spaces. People drink everywhere. We live in Los Angeles.
Yeah, exactly.
And I could talk about that on a tangent, but there's also a lot of unresolved trauma in the community. Mm-hmm. I don't like to dictate on what that looks like in relationship to green space. Yeah. I do think there's room for conversation on how to be safe,
Of course.
But not like morally criminalize anybody.
Yeah, I mean, I think the key point that you kind of brought up there was just the fact that this language is used against communities like that, like for the same reason, again, to displace them. And that's not something that we're just seeing locally, but we're seeing it in a national level too. There's the language that people throw around to make sure, like, hey, like, you know, I'm gonna label these people this specific way, you start distorting people's perspective on that, you know, and that's dangerous.
Very, very dangerous. I mean, we're seeing it globally.
Yeah.
We're seeing that's how genocides start.
Right.
And I think that at the root of all of this is erasure. And if something like this gets developed at Flattop, not only do we lose this sacred, ancient green space, but we are also dictating what happens to the rest of the community. And I think I said it last time I was here that Lincoln Heights is the oldest suburb of all of Los Angeles. And that includes families that have been there for generations. And that includes families that are just arriving for the first time ever. We are a very heavily immigrant-based community. We always have been. That's where the Chicano walkout started. Yeah. That's where the moratorium was organized. That's where a lot of the Zoot Suit riots happened. And when we start to displace our people, we displace that history and that culture. And I mean, I don't know how you feel about this, but I think that we are so disconnected even from our ancestral roots as like brown people. There are so many identities that no one can agree on: Chicano, Latinx, Latino, Hispanic, you know. And I think that's because we are disconnected. Yeah. We're so disconnected, and I think that's on purpose. And so when we start to fight to preserve our green spaces and start trying to connect to what it means to be Indigenous, or what it even means to be a brown person taking up space here on this land, we start to really understand that spaces like this being developed and privatized has been happening since the dawn of colonization, you know, and there's a lot of history to learn from that.
Yeah, you know, I think one thing that people should focus on is, like, you know, we mentioned the setting of precedents, because that's one thing that sometimes rolls off our mind on that, because you don't really think about certain actions having long-term consequences when you're in the moment, you know? And when we fail to see that, we start letting things happen that slowly start dictating what the new norm is.
Exactly.
You know, and if we don't stop it by the time we realize it, it's way too late.
Yeah. No, I agree with you. And I should circle us back, but the precedence here is that this project was denied. But someone bought the new property. It's a surgeon, and he is appealing the denial.
Okay.
And that's where we are right now. The city has to reconsider, do we keep this denied or do we overturn it?
Yeah.
And that decision is being made on the 23rd of this month. 28th of this month. My apologies.
Yeah. Now, is the argument different this time around? And, like, do you have any insight into what that argument is looking like?
Yeah, that's such a huge can of worms. But the original denial was denied for 4 reasons. And the new owner has addressed all of those 4 reasons. And to be very honest with you, in my opinion, after being there for the hearing last month, it did get it got continued. No decision was made.
Yeah.
What ended up happening was a tribal leader from the Tongva tribe called in saying, hey, we weren't consulted on this, and we would like a 30-day extension, which is why it got continued. And it's being heard later this month for a final decision, unless it gets continued again. I mean, I don't know what's going to happen. And I think, you know, that there's a big possibility of this project being approved by the commission. That's what they do. They're here for the city. I mean, just at the last hearing, he was saying, why are we, like, putting up the bar higher for the developer? that was like the president. He said that.
Mm-hmm.
And people are like, are you here for the community or are you here for the developer? Because these commissioners are appointed by the mayor.
Yeah.
And they're all here to pass developments. Rarely ever have I ever seen them deny something. I've seen that happen once, and then they got sued and it got overturned, which was the Tiao development in Boyle Heights. So we have this entire system stacked up against us. And I don't want people to drown in that, like, feeling of defeat.
Yeah.
Because there is so much more power that we have outside of the system. We have to understand what it means to organize outside of politics, outside of this government system, because the truth of the matter is, Eddie, like, no politician is going to save us.
Yeah.
Not one of them. This system has been in place for hundreds and hundreds of years to function the way it's functioning. And if there has ever been any change of history, it's not because of someone in the system. It's because of us outside, organizing and creating havoc and doing something. And so there are a lot of conversations happening on what that looks like. And the component to it that's kind of hard to swallow is I kept thinking to myself, it was such a victory when this was denied. And then 2 years, 3 years later, here I am again.
Yeah.
And let's say that we're able to convince the commission to deny it. This guy is going to sell the property. Someone else is going to buy it. And 2 years from now, I'm going to be right back in this spot.
Yeah.
So what do we do? Like, what does this look like? And realizing we have to buy the property. The community has to buy the property, which is like, what, $2 million? And then taking that step of like, well, now you're thinking about not only being a part of the system of capitalism, but it's also the question of what does it mean to now become an owner of the land? And what does it mean to include community in that?
Yeah.
What does it mean? What does land back mean? What does that look like? And I think these are all conversations that no one can agree on, that no one wants to sit down at the table like everyone. And so this is uncharted territory. But I do have high hopes that there won't be a mansion built there. Even if the commission approves it, I don't think the mansion is going to happen.
No, damn. It is definitely sad to hear, especially hear you say that there's like a chance of it happening. Because again, you think that the more people that voice their opinions and say that they're opposed to it, that would be the win all, like, hey, nobody wants it, let's not do it. It's a vote, right? Everybody's voting for it.
I agree.
And like the fact that you said, like, sure, I mean, let's say the current person gets denied, like you said, they sell it, then it's a whole battle all over again. It's just a never-ending cycle. And the fact that you brought up like the community buying the land, I mean, that definitely is an option if people got together and shared a couple pennies and put it together. But now, what would that look like if, let's say, that was a thing? I know there's I think it was in Sereno. I think it was like the Eastside Cafe. They ended up purchasing some of the building and what was it called?
The Land Trust?
Yeah, Community Land Trust. There you go. Would that be something similar in terms of what would happen at Flattop if community were to put something together like that?
Yeah, I think it's worth exploring all sorts of avenues right now. And I think people should stop being afraid to have those conversations. Yeah. And I think it's important to also understand that those parts of the conversation should be led by locals who have been doing this work for forever. So many times I see opportunists just come in and try to take over the space, try to take over the narrative. And I think that's when we lose movements and when things get disrupted. There's, and this is a shameless plug, but I'm working with a group of really awesome locals and individuals who have worked with Flattop for a very long time. And we formed a group called Lincoln Heights Grow years ago with the idea of we want a community garden in Lincoln Heights. And then you know, the way life works, something just comes up, and for us, it was Flattop, and we had to jump on it. And we've been living and breathing Flattop nonstop, and that's how we were able to get over 50 people at the hearing last month. Mm-hmm. We organized around it, and we let everyone know, because nobody knew that this was being appealed.
Oh, damn.
Yeah, everyone thought, oh, we won this 2 years ago.
Mm-hmm.
It's over. No one had eyes on this. And one of our group members, he goes on a hike up there every day. And he saw a sign that was all tagged up, and he approached it, and it was a city sign that said, there's a hearing on this in 2 weeks. And we were like, what? Nobody knew.
Yeah. Are they supposed to inform the community on that stuff, or they get away with it just by placing a sign there?
Exactly. As long as they place the sign, that's it. And they're supposed to do some mailing, but they never do. Mm-hmm. And it's interesting you bring that up, though, because at the hearing, the developer was like, here's a list of 30 neighbors that live at Flattop that are in support. And then we had actual neighbors come up there, and they were like, hi, you used my address, but I'm actually opposing this.
What?
Yeah, they were like, the address you're using, that person moved out 2 years ago. Like, no one has knocked at my door.
Yeah.
And, like, they get away with it. Developers get away with this. Yeah. And if we would not have been there to counteract that, then that's all that goes on the record. You know? And for me, even though I know that these systems are against us, even though I know that these commissioners are going to approve it, to me, it's still worth it getting people to go to the hearing for, like, 2-3 main reasons. One of them is so that you see for yourself how this system works. And I hope that it activates you, that it enrages you to see that we have 100 community members here saying no, and that doesn't matter to you, to the commission. And also to have it on the record. Having that documented is huge, because if anything like this ever goes to a lawsuit, you can only sue for things that are on the record. And the more you have on there and public comment and all of that, it's better.
Yeah. Now, you mentioned earlier that there was like about 4 reasons of why it got initially rejected. I think, if I'm correct, from my understanding, it was something about the fire lanes for emergency vehicles it was not like safe for them to get up there. I think there was also I remember this. I'm pretty sure I remember this. One of them was that they didn't consult with the Indigenous. What's it called? Is it Gabrieleño? No.
Yeah. The band of Mission Gabrieleño.
Yeah, the Keach, right? Yeah. That's right. So I think there's a law or something, AB 52, that they have to get in contact with them if there's like an ancestral cultural site or something, right? And I think they didn't do that.
That's right.
So if this new guy taking these, I forgot the other 2. Do you know the other 2 that it was? Like, it was a fire.
One of them was the wall. It had like a third wall that wasn't right, and so they eliminated the wall. And the 4th one, some technicality. And
I'm trying to remember what it was, but whatever. Point is, like, if this new person is trying to get this done, they still obviously have to figure out how to address all this stuff and say, hey, well, we figured it out. Now, approve it. Yeah. Now, what do the people do there outside of just, going to these meetings or at least, oh my God, I'm like blanking out right now.
Hearings?
The hearings.
Yeah.
How do we get people activated outside of these hearings?
Yeah. If we think about Flattop specifically, we had like a brainstorming session of what it means to occupy Flattop. And we organized the first ever kite festival up at Flattop. And that was like 3 Saturdays ago. Yeah. And it was incredible. We had people up there that had never been up there. And we had like señoras flying kites for the first time in their life. And that was awesome. And just seeing everyone laughing and screaming was so unbelievably beautiful. And it was such a grounding moment in realizing this is exactly why we do this. And I want people to participate in that kind of stuff. So many times I just stay at home and I see there's something going on and I just won't go for whatever reason. But I want us to challenge ourselves to just do things, create things, because the world is changing so fast. And if we want to address any injustice, we need to be active.
Yeah.
And, you know, I was writing about this the other day of how do we dismantle this kind of system, whether it be the government or capitalism, whatever it may be. And I came up with the conclusion at that time that it's by creating versus consumption. We are so trained to be consumers. Yeah. Even if it's just like doom scrolling on your phone. Like, do you ever get stuck?
Oh man, I catch myself and I'm like, "What are you doing, dude? Like, get off the phone."
And it feels weird too after. Like I feel hazed and weird. Like, whoa.
That is very true. Yeah.
And to me, it's like, yeah, what are you doing? And also, why aren't you creating? Create something. Do something that people aren't doing, and even if it's something everyone is doing. And so part of that was the documentary that we made.
Yeah.
One of the girls and I, Hanya, she had the idea of like, I want to interview people up at Flattop. So we went up there, we did an interview, and we didn't have any of the proper equipment, and it sounded awful, and it was really windy. And then literally like 2 or 3 days later, I get a DM by a follower saying, hey, I would like to make a social media video on Flattop. And we met up at a cafe, and I was like really adamant about like, you know, it's always such an interesting spot to be in, Eddie, when someone wants to document like your trauma, like your harm that you're going through. And I think there needs to be so much intention around that, and that was my fear.
Yeah.
But Sid and B were just phenomenal people and brilliant artists and producers. And after they interviewed me like on camera, which I was like really nervous, they were like, actually, this can't be a 60-second social media video. I think we want to do a mini documentary. And I was like, oh my God, okay, let's do it.
Yeah.
And it ended up being 11 minutes. And it's on Vimeo now, and it truly captures what Flattop is, how people use it, how it's literally a kickback spot for some people, how they captured the first ever kite festival, and they also captured a lot of what Lincoln Heights looks like right now. And to me, the first time I saw it, I sobbed.
Yeah.
I really did.
That was a beautiful video. It was a beautiful documentary.
Yeah.
Yeah, I got to see it, and again, I haven't had the opportunity to go up there myself, but one thing that that was a big takeaway from that is just giving people's experiences with that space validation. Yeah. You know, because I think that's huge, and that's something that because I was at this event just a couple of days ago, that I experienced myself too, that I feel like we all share experiences in specific spaces in this community, right? But we don't get to share that a lot of the time with others.
That's right.
So if we don't allow ourselves to share these moments, then it kind of just stays with us. And sometimes they may not feel like it's a real thing going on. You know, but this documentary 100%. In itself, it captured the essence of what this place is. Yeah. But at the same time, again, giving the validation to these people's experiences and how they connect to it.
Yeah. No, that was so well put. That was perfect. We should have you at the next screening explaining it. Because it's even like I had mentioned to be like, oh yeah, I've only seen the video like 3 times. She was like, what? I've seen it like 200 times. And for me, like seeing it is so emotional. And I think that you're right. Validating what our community looks like in like the most real way is unseen.
Yeah.
And I value so much seeing some gems in Lincoln Heights that, you know, probably won't be like that in 50 years or less. They even captured the famous Elote Man from Lincoln Heights. Have you heard of him?
No.
The Lincoln Heights Elote Man? Dude, you will be in line for like 2 hours just to get an elote from Timoteo Cactus Flower. That's his name. He's there on the weekends, and he's there from like midnight to 2 a.m.
What, selling elotes?
Yeah.
What?
And these are like
That's
crazy
cool.
elotes, okay? Like you won't get any like his, and it's behind the 99-cent store parking lot. And it'll be 10 p.m. and there's like a line already.
Damn. All right. You got some good elotes then.
Yeah. you should go there too. So the fact that they even captured that was just, it's beautiful.
Yeah. No, it really is. And, you know, I think right now I had kind of asked the question about what do people do outside of these hearings, right? Like, how do they connect? And I think right now it just kind of hit me was like just sharing these spaces with our community members, right? I keep going back to this Open Streets event, but something that I felt that day was just like this connection. Like people were so excited to be outdoors, to be with each other, just having fun, like just not having to worry about the capitalist system. Like we're just here chilling, hanging out. Hey, I haven't seen you in a minute. And then that builds that connection. And I think, that it's going to ultimately bring you closer to your community and you start caring more.
100%. I think that building relationships is where we start.
Yeah.
And I always say, talk to your neighbors. But that doesn't limit to like your next door neighbor, but like literally your community neighbors. Yeah. This project happened because of a random DM. And people need to just do that more. There are so many talented people out there and creatives, and there's so much learning to be done. Like just go out there and do it. Go to that event. Film yourself walking somewhere. Be awkward. It's fine. Because it's what keeps us human. And right now a lot of people don't feel human. Yeah. There's a lot of ugliness happening. And I completely understand what you mean when you felt like at that event, like that camaraderie, that's special. That's important. And in the age of media and this like internet third space that most of us occupy, I think it's so important to unplug from that and go back to in person.
Yeah. It's enriching, like for your soul, and I get that every time I get to spend time with the people who reside in my community, my neighborhood, and it's I don't know, it's just one of those things that I think it's at its core one of the things that we forget a lot in this fast-paced world, right? Like you said, sometimes you're just doom scrolling, you're just liking things, or you feel like you're being proactive by liking certain pages. But at the end of the day, it's like, what's a big takeaway for you? Like, I don't feel like I did anything afterwards. Like, so I have to feel like I'm doing something on the ground to feel this, I don't know, fulfillment.
Yeah. It's so important to name that because most people don't. And I think that not only does that apply to building relationships and doing creative things, but it also applies to activism and organizing. I have a deep fear of how stagnant our organizing has become because it's so digitalized. And not to get too serious, but we live in a surveillance state.
Yeah.
And we need to really connect back with our elders who were activists and survived that and know how to organize outside of like digital media. Go back to the old school, knocking on doors, sending letters. I don't know. Yeah. I don't want to say too much. But you get what I'm saying.
Yeah, no, I definitely get that. And, to an extent, early on this year, right, when we had this new administration come in, there was a point while I was doing this show that I felt like, oh my God, am I like thinking of self-censoring, like from specific things? And I started thinking about like, no, wait, what am I talking about? Like, why am I even considering that? Like, yeah, it is something that, depending on what you're talking about, where you're going with things, like it seems like it's right, like, I don't know, a lyrical. But at the end of the day, like, if nobody else is going to take the time to have conversations like this, and this is not even a radical conversation, we're legit just asking questions as to why this is necessary, why do we have to be okay with this, and that's a big question that a lot of us are sometimes afraid to ask, and it's a simple one.
Yeah. What kind of, was there a moment or a specific like thought that made you feel like, no, what I'm doing is right. I'm not going to succumb to fear or whatever?
Yeah, there definitely was. I was considering, again, just kind of like maybe I shouldn't have certain guests on, right? Like at some point, he directed this film on Palestine and Gaza. And I was like, we already had a schedule, and I got kind of scared. I was like, do I really want to have this conversation knowing that, you know, we have people being arrested, you know, for what they partook in a couple months ago at the universities, you know?
We all saw that.
Yeah, you know, and people getting arrested out of nowhere, like by random officers in civilian clothes. And I'm just thinking like, oh my God, like, I don't want that to happen to me. Like, nah. You know, I started going down this rabbit hole of like dark thoughts of what could happen to me. And after that, I was like, you know what? Nah. Like, that means if I decide to do that, I'm just succumbing to that fear, and I'm letting them win. You know? And I don't feel right about that. You know, I don't feel right about that, especially having a platform like this where I'm trying to build just critical thinking skills, I guess, if you put it in a basic form.
It's so important.
You know? And I was like, nah, this has to keep going, and I'm not going to limit myself or, you know, just censor myself. That was weird.
Yeah. No, that's so valid. And I really value that you shared that. Thank you. And I asked that because I do see a lot of fear going around, and I'm trying to be very intentional of not making decisions out of fear or anxiety.
I like that, intentional.
Yeah. And I think that when we take up space the way that we do, people like us who do have that fear, they see it. And when they're like, oh, well, they're doing it, like, I can too. It's okay to talk about gentrification. It's okay to talk about Palestine and Gaza. And kind of what you said earlier, like if we don't have actions right now, by the time that we realize it, it'll be too late. It's like exactly what we're doing, like the little trickling of things. And I mean, I go down the rabbit holes all the time. I mean, my degree's in philosophy, so existentialism is my forever mood. And I think that I value when people take a step back to reflect on how they take up space, why they take up space, and what that looks like. And so I'm trying to be more like that. And so, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it takes work. I mean, it's something I'm consistently working on. And, you know, I was thinking about it a couple of days ago when I was, you know, just doing my job, doing my work, and I'm considering who I'm going to have on the show and whatnot. But I start thinking like, okay, like, why do I keep doing this? Like, I don't make any money off of this. Like, I don't gain anything from this. Like,
I have those thoughts too.
You know, I'm just trying to have a conversation with people, but that gives me like so much. It fulfills me so much. Like, it makes me feel like I'm actually doing something for the greater whole, like the greater good, instead of just focusing on me, you know? And I think that's something that we each kind of have to go through when we're living in a capitalist society, you know, because that way of thinking, like me, that is a capitalist aspect of things.
100%.
You know, and once we start removing ourselves from that, we start seeing, okay, I don't need to do things in society that contribute by me spending things, like you said earlier. Like, what am I creating? What am I trying to bring and kind of help other people kind of, you know, get to the same wavelength? I'm not saying I'm in a higher wavelength. All I'm saying is that it's a different one, right?
I hear you.
It can be parallel to it.
Yeah. No, I think that's so real. And like, I have fears too. Like, I'm the president of a very public board, and I'm really loud about certain things, and I've gained a lot of negative attention. I mean, last time that I spoke was about the USC assault at City Hall, and I recently rewatched the video, and that guy is like charging at me. He had like this rabid look in his eyes, and I forgot about that. And I think that with everything happening in the administration right now, it's valid to have fear, but I think that what that means for us organizers, we need to just be better intentional and practice safety and security culture, which are very real things that groups train on. And I think that when you're brown and you have an opinion, even that right now is a target. And that doesn't worry me. We have survived all of these centuries, and if we're not loud about what's happening, then we are erased. And to me, that is like the worst thing that can happen, you know?
Yeah, you know, if I always kind of this thought in my head where I guess our actions, like some context. When I was younger, I used to be into punk rock, so I'll consider myself a punk, right?
Okay.
But the mentality, the attitude, the ideas of that kind of carried on until now, right? I'm in my mid-30s. So when I think about it, like what we're doing, the fact that we're speaking up, we're being loud about it, we're drawing a line, basically, that's punk.
Very punk.
That's the punk in essence right there.
Super.
And I don't think there's anything else that you can do outside of that is you know, just punk, man.
No, I agree. And I respect that so hard, like, honestly. And there are so many cool people doing cooler stuff than I'm doing, and that inspires me. So, yeah, if there's anything I should say is be punk.
Be punk. Yeah, it's going to take you places. And at the end of the day, it's going to open up new levels of thinking for you as well. You know, it did that for me, you know, from a young age. And I think it's just something that we slowly should expose ourselves to. I don't know what's wrong with my tongue today, man. I'm like stuttering.
It's late. It's late, yeah.
But, you know, it's just one of those things that we're all going to come across. And I think it's up to us to figure out how we want to move with it and that intention. I think it always comes back to the intention. Like, you're legit telling yourself what your outcome's going to be based on what you want and how you want to get there.
100%. And it requires effort. It requires planning. I think so much in my life, I thought things would just magically happen. You know, like in my early 20s, like, oh, by the time I'm 30, I'm going to have X, Y, Z. Yeah. And then realizing, wait, no, I have to like actually work for that, towards that. Like, it doesn't just happen. And maybe that was just me being feral out in the world. I don't know if anyone else can like relate to that. But when I started putting in effort and planning things and practicing things, that's when like things start to happen. And right now what I'm practicing is just connecting with people, connecting with creatives, talking to people more, which to me is a way to challenge myself, because I would rather not. I'd rather be home. Like, if I had a podcast, it'd be called Introverted Ape or something. You know? So it's recognizing how you function in this world and just challenge yourself, you know?
Now, since you mentioned challenge, like, what is one thing that you would challenge somebody listening to this to do? Like, something starting small, like, what would you tell them?
Get off your phone.
Hey, it's so huge.
Practice being on your phone only 1 hour a day. That's it. That's it. I know someone, and I respect this. She went like the extra mile and got a flip phone. Yeah. And is only on social media when she's at home on her tablet. Like, that's super intentional. And I was like, wow, am I about to get a flip phone? You know?
Get a razor.
I had one. Throwback. But just if you can be intentional, and I feel like I'm overusing that word now, but be disciplined enough to set boundaries for yourself, that will take you very far. And if you can start off small, it's get off your phone. If you're not someone that's like really on your phone, then it's learn a new hobby. And then meet other people that do that and start doing it with them. Yeah,
no, we're crazy. We're crazy little apes here. No, well, thank you so much, Fernanda. We're getting at that time, but what can people expect in terms of like what you're involved with, like or the hearing? Like, what's gonna happen leading up to that?
So I know we are planning on fundraising for whether it be legal action for Flattop or purchasing Flattop. And so you can follow us at Grow Lincoln Heights on Instagram. There will also be more community events up at Flattop. You can also follow my personal page, fernie.ferns, and I try my best to update and plug people into community actions and updates. But stay alert and go to Flattop. If you haven't been, I beg of you, go to Flattop. While we have it, go to Flattop.
Next time I have an episode or talk to you, I'll be like, I'm going to send you a selfie.
Oh, you better. You better, yeah.
Now, earlier I read one of the pros for the building of the mansion. Right now, before we finish this off, I want to read one that kind of caught my attention as to why they were opposing it. And it says, I'm concerned for the impact to the long-standing community of this neighborhood. For many generations, Lincoln Heights has been a neighborhood where immigrants and working-class families have had a chance to flourish. The last thing our community needs is luxury housing, which excludes and displaces our long-standing community. This is my opinion and an act that is of grave economic injustice. And I was like, I don't know, that just really, I felt that one.
Mm-hmm.
And it's just, when you contrast it with why they were for it, it makes it seem like super ignorant and selfish,
100%.
You know? And completely void of again giving validation to the experiences people have had in this space.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, I'm hoping for the best. I'm hoping that this is not just another 2 years you're good, and then the next couple of years you're back on the cycle again, and or in the situation that Viva with the Al Corporation had to deal with. It's one of those things where you had that high, and then that low, they just pull the rug from under your feet and. Nothing happened,
Yeah.
And it's obviously discouraging, but I think if we continue moving with the intention, I think we can figure out a balance of how we can continue fighting.
100%. It's a learning experience at the end of the day. We're primates. We're learning, but don't be afraid to be punk. Don't be afraid to be radical.
That's the takeaway from this. Exactly.
Yeah, just do it.
Thank you, Fernanda, for everything, and then we'll keep in touch.
Yeah.
Everybody else, you're listening to KQBH LP, Los Angeles, California, 101.5 FM. I don't know what's wrong with my tongue. I swear to God today. But we'll leave you with some music, and we will see you guys next week.
Good night.
But now it's time.